Hello, and welcome back to Inside Urgent Care. I'm Samantha Wolf, and we're happy to have you back with us. Today's episode is a little different. We're making some changes around here, and we're very excited to tell you about them. I've been the host of this podcast since we launched about a year ago, and we've brought you stories of those working in urgent care, sharing their stories, backgrounds, their takes on different trends. But we think it's time to focus more on the inside of Inside Urgent Care, getting into what it really actually looks like to work in these centers, which is why we'll be spotlighting the opportunities and benefits of working in the urgent care field, and really being the platform where these conversations are happening in this way. And with this change, we'll have a new host who can certainly speak to what it's like to work in urgent care, as she herself has worked in the field for over a decade. We're so happy to have Dr. Cassandra Donnelly taking over Inside Urgent Care. Welcome, Dr. Donnelly.
Thank you, Sam. I feel welcomed.
Awesome. We're so happy to have you. And it makes all the sense in the world to me that you would be the one to host this podcast, given your urgent care background and involvement in the field. But can you tell listeners a little bit more about why you wanted to venture into podcast hosting?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm really excited about this new launch and this new venture. Certainly some really big shoes to fill, but I know that you're not going very far, and I will be able to reach back whenever I need to, just for anything additional.
Almost definitely.
Thank you. The podcast, arena really is so exciting to me. I think that as we look back at the pandemic and as we move more to virtual everything, podcast just seems to be the way to reach the the most people in the least amount of time. And I find that my podcast that I listen to, I can pick up anytime. I can schedule to make sure I'm going to be live if I choose to do that. I like the fact that if a podcast is live, although this one is not, that you can actually just kind of lean in, ask questions, and become really interactive. And so, this particular platform itself, as a podcast, is just really intriguing to me. I think that medicine and the things that we do to add to medicine, those things that we do to make medicine what it is, not just the actual science of it, but the operations of it and the clinical edition of it, those things that we find really important. I think that the podcast is a perfect way to be able to springboard those into people's cars and into their homes. And so that's really why I'm excited. I'm really, really um, jumping in feet first here, and just really want to share that and my experiences, and what's going on in urgent care with our listeners.
Yeah, we're super excited about it. And I think you're right. It's about meeting people where they are. And the podcast world has really blown up so much. And I think there's so many opportunities here. Like, yeah, we don't do live episodes, but who's to say we can't do that in the future as we start to really get a broad listenership? So I think there's a lot of opportunities here.
Agreed.
So, what are you most excited about in taking on this new adventure?
I'm most excited about the people that I will have a chance to interview and the stories that I am hoping will come out of the podcast. When I think about the lineup, there's some really heavy hitters, and I won't spoil it, but I hope that in each podcast I can give some hints of the folks that will be coming up soon. And so I think introducing the broader landscape of urgent care to those people that really are tried and true to the business, right? You may come on our podcast and we could literally have someone that's working our front desk every day, and hearing from them. You could come on and hear from someone that has worked in urgent care, been out of urgent care, and come back to urgent care for different reasons. And then you can hear from the leaders. the leaders in our Urgent Care Association board that also work in urgent cares, and then those that are aspiring. And so I think just knowing that the interviews can come from soup to nuts, from the front door to the X-ray room in our urgent cares, I think is what is really exciting to me.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be any lack of content. And when it comes to who we're interviewing or who we can talk to, because yeah, there's so many positions within a center, right? From the front door to the x-ray to the leadership, management, clinicians. But then there's various models of urgent care. So that's going to look different in different organizations, in different centers. So there's just so many ways these interviews can go.
That's right. So many ways, and I'm excited about exploring those ways.
Yeah, me too. I think it's a conversation that hasn't been had publicly. So I think it's really exciting to get that out there because I feel like there's so much that's still kind of unknown about the inner workings of urgent care. So
Mhm.
let's really get it out there.
For sure. So can you imagine as we go about moving urgent care to the next level, and you're wondering how the staff at the urgent cares in the Northeast pair
Mhm.
differently than the urgent cares in the South.
Right.
And you hear from someone working in the urgent cares in, let's say, the dead of summer, right? The middle of summer, and you find out that what's going on with them is actually quite different than what's going on in a different part of the country. So for people that are thinking about moving to that another particular area, for companies that think about expanding to a different area, all of those conversations become very important. And you then get to speak to people that you may not have had a chance to speak to if you had not heard this on this podcast. So I'm excited to sit down.
Yeah. Yeah, the day in the life is going to look a lot different, even yeah, geographically, like you're
Exactly.
talking about, which I didn't necessarily think about before, but that's absolutely the case. Weather, geography, all of that impacts your operations and how you interact with your communities.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And then when you think about even the products, right, that we use and the services that exist in some urgent cares versus others, and people begin to talk about introducing some of those things and the way they have been successful, the way they have seen things done, and someone gets a gleam in their eye that, I didn't think about that before, but that's actually something that we could try. And so my goal and my hope is that we introduce people, we make connections with people within urgent care, we make connections with people outside of urgent care just because they realize that from the periphery, somehow we can be connected. So I'm an emergency medicine physician, as many people may know, and I've been in urgent care for, as you said, over a decade. And the things that I've learned has made me really understand how to make that connection between the emergency department, the urgent care, and even back to primary care. So it's a really interesting position to sit in, and I just think that there's so much more that needs to be explored in this role. I think we can find out how deep we can dive in a day in the life of urgent care. And that to me is really exciting.
I think so too. And there's so many times I know myself personally, and you said you're a podcast listener too, that something comes up and it makes you change the way you see something, or you just don't know what you don't know, right? Until
Right.
you do. So putting this education out there, putting these conversations out there, I think is super important to, yeah, change the way people are thinking about urgent care as a whole in the healthcare ecosystem, how it relates to family medicine, how it relates to emergency medicine. And you just may not be thinking in that way until you hear it for the first time or hear it in a way that resonates with you in your specific role or in your specific region. So, yeah, thank you so much for taking this on.
Exactly. You're so welcome.
And so we kind of touched on this, but what are the types of questions you'll be asking your guests, and how will it be a departure from what has been happening already on this podcast?
The questions that I think I will ask my guests are, for some part, will be traditional, right? Say, I think that will kind of start out with, you know, maybe seem more mundane, of how'd you get into urgent care? What makes you like urgent care so much? What are the things that you wish you could change? But I think that as we go a little off the cuff, right, and get a little edgy with it, I think we can throw a couple of surprise questions in there for people and asking people, if you weren't in urgent care, right? What would you be doing right now? And I'm hoping that people can think of nothing else but being in urgent care, but that might not be the case. I'm hoping that people will talk to us about what brought them in to urgent care versus, their next safest option. And then I'm hoping that people will honestly say whether or not they have anything that they regret, right, about urgent care. Because I think that as we dive into those really, edgy questions and those really kind of on the cuff questions, there are nuggets there that we can take to teach us about what we can do better. Because oftentimes we think that, everything will be very positive and rosy. But I will tell you, some of the most important lessons that I have learned, and some of the most important nuggets that I have really received has been when someone has told me something that I could do better or differently, right? It hasn't always been, you're doing this great or you're doing that great. It's really about constructively looking at what we can do differently. How can we capitalize on those things that are opportunities? And so that's what I want to get to. I want to get to our opportunities in urgent care that can really keep us propelling forward. Because I will tell you that if we're not careful about those opportunities and we're not 5 steps ahead, we will find ourselves not ready for the next level of urgent care medicine. And so that's what I want to get to. I want to get to how can we stay ready for the next level of urgent care medicine?
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a really good point. And we want this to be a resource for people, right? We want this to be valuable. When people are listening in, that's valuable time. So it's not just, like you said, it's not all just rosy. Like, let's be real about it. What are some of the things that you could maybe avoid, or, people regret about their certain path? We want to show all different sides of it, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then, earlier you mentioned about, hey, will we ever take the podcast live? And we have our urgent care convention annually. And what better way to showcase what we're doing and what people may be missing if they decided that they weren't coming to the urgent care convention, but to go live from the convention floor? I mean, that to me is next level urgent care podcast, inside urgent care, right? Like interviewing people that
Mhm.
are boots on the ground, doing it every single day. I mean, that's my goal of this podcast, is to actually allow people a platform to be seen and to really have them involved in urgent care every day. And what better way to eventually launch us to that point?
Right. And we're not trying to promote the convention or anything here, but just coming off of that, it's absolutely the case that there's nowhere else that you're getting so many urgent care professionals in one spot. So I think that would be really neat to do that in the future, and to just show the rest of the world this is where we all convene once a year. And that's where so many great conversations are happening. So if we can tap into that, I think that makes all the sense in the world.
Absolutely. And so, in that same vein, each of our regions has their own conference, and the same thing can be said about dropping
Mhm.
in on Naruka, on Saruka, on Kaluka, right? And making sure that they have that love from urgent care medicine as well. And so, that's really where I see this going. I see it really broad, and I see it boundaryless. And I'm really excited about where it can go, knowing that we can design it how we want to, and we can go again right into the urgent care and interview folks that are there doing this every single day.
Absolutely. So what do you think, if you could boil this down, what do you think is the biggest value here in having this podcast?
Honestly, I think the biggest value is that it's coming from folks that are inside the urgent cares,
Mm-hmm.
right? How more relatable, how much more street cred can you have than from the folks that are already inside? I think that's it, really. I am working in urgent care, obviously, connected to urgent care, and have been doing this for some time. But I think that the biggest value is understanding that we don't know everything about it yet, and that giving people a platform to be able to speak, and get their point across, get their word out, rep their urgent care, right? I think that that's the biggest value. People see themselves. I want urgent care employees and urgent care owners and urgent care, those folks who love urgent care, to see themselves within the podcast and to see a reason for them to be able to connect to it.
Yeah. And speaking of which, you're not going to be interviewing yourself, obviously, and this isn't necessarily an interview with you, but to that point, is there anything that you would like to share from your experience, kind of high level, in working in an urgent care for, I, what is it now? Is it 12, 13 years? It's
Yeah.
definitely over, yeah, over 10 years. So you're pretty seasoned. I guess, what are some key takeaways that you would like to share with our audience from your time in urgent care?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I have worked in urgent care since 2012. Actually 2013. In 2013, I worked in urgent care. In 2012, I kind of started to begin looking at urgent cares to figure out, is this what I want to do? And then took the leap. I had the great fortune of having worked for a great urgent care, right? And I've worked for, as many of you know, Wall Street Urgent Care here in Georgia, as Piedmont Urgent Care for since 2013. I think that what I want to tell people and what people can see from my story is that you can grow within the urgent care and grow within the organization that's growing, or you can decide that, hey, this is where I want to live and in this particular role, and you can stay right in that role and, kind of teach people what you've done in your role to do what you've done. So there's lots of different ways that you can, you know, jump in and be effective. I want people to know that if you're living in an area and you're part of that community and you're working in that community under urgent care, can you imagine how great that would be for a patient to come in and actually see, right, the folks from their community working in the urgent care where they actually visit? I think there's no greater feeling than that. What I would tell people about working in urgent care and really living and breathing it is that it's a very rewarding experience when someone can come in and you can fix their problem and they can leave out and feel as though they can appreciate what they have received that day. Not that they always get what they wanted, which is something different, but they can appreciate that they received what they needed that day. And that's a really good feeling. And you feel as though you've actually made a difference in someone's life. So urgent care for me has been the way to go. I've done it again, like you said, for over a decade. And I'm just really excited about the people that I've helped to grow within urgent care. My mentees, I think that they have done an amazing job in their careers, and it's just so much more to be done.
Yeah.
I guess I have a lot to say about what I've done in urgent care, but I'm really happy about that.
Right. No, that's great because when you're talking about mentorship programs, that's a whole other path that we could go down too. there's so many different things that are going on within the centers, within the organizations themselves that are supporting employees. So that's something
Absolutely.
to consider talking about as well.
Absolutely. There are trainers, there are trainees, there are different departments. And I think that as people delve into how they can grow their careers, they're seeing different people in different roles. And whereas you may not have thought about a particular role before, now you see someone there and that piques your interest. That's fabulous. I have a number of medical assistants that have gone on to become nurse practitioners, physician's assistants. That to me is a fabulous transition, right? It's someone that has said, the sky's the limit for me, and I'm going to do this.
Yeah, that's really nice to see too, firsthand. So, is there anything else that you would like to share with us before we wrap up our episode today?
So, yes, so I would like to say, Samantha, I am so happy that you have extended this opportunity to me. I know we have talked about podcasts for some time now, but I
Mhm.
know that I and your listeners are so happy and so thankful of the job that you have done over this past year and a half. And I'm giving you a virtual hand clap, a virtual high five to say, way to go. Happy to have received the torch and am looking forward to how I will continue to carry it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so happy to have you to hand it off to. I think you will do a fabulous job, and our listeners are going to love it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, Cassandra, do you want to close us out?
Yes. So I am so looking forward to our first episode of me hosting this next podcast. I have an exciting interview from someone that has been in urgent care kind of from the sidelines, adding his spin to it. And actually, our first guest isn't somebody who works in the urgent care, but his lean in has been very important from an educational perspective. And I know that our listeners will be very, very fortunate to actually hear what he has to say. So tune in for the next one. Thank you again for listening to this one as we transition from Samantha to myself. I will see you next time.